Begin by reading from Psalm 123. The subject of our sermon this morning is slavery. And we should remember that this is not merely a matter of relations between men and men, but it's a matter of our relation to God, for we are his servants, and he is our master, our Lord. So as we come to him in worship, we ought to have this heart, expressed in Psalm 123, a song of degrees. Unto thee lift I up mine eyes, O thou that dwellest in the heavens. Behold, as the eyes of servants look unto the hand of their masters, and as the eyes of a maiden unto the hand of her mistress, so our eyes wait upon the Lord our God, until that he have mercy upon us. Have mercy upon us, O Lord. Have mercy upon us, for we are exceedingly filled with contempt. Our soul is exceedingly filled with the scorning of those that are at ease, and with the contempt of the proud. We turn now to Genesis 36. Our consecutive reading will be from this passage, and we'll continue in the life of Jacob. Now, life is interrupted here in this chapter by a pause. It's a chapter about Esau. Now, you may be at a loss to understand why God puts this here, this entire chapter speaking of the genealogy of Esau and all his children and the dukes that come from him. But there are two important things to remember here. That God is faithful to his promise to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He will be a God to them and to their seed after them. And this promise has its fulfillment even in the unbelieving seed. This should be a comfort to all parents, that God will do good, one way or another, to the children of those who trust him. And God does great good to Esau. According, sadly, to Esau's character, only in temporal things. He was a temporal, earthly, natural man. He didn't have the best blessings that Isaac had, but he was not without blessing. And so God will be, so to speak, without excuse in his dealing with our families. Children, God will be without excuse in his dealing with you. He will prove faithful. God forbid it would only be in earthly things, and that you, by your own fault, would sell the birthright that you have, the greater part of which is spiritual and not temporal. And if you do, God will hold you to account for it, and all the temporal blessings will answer against you on the day of wrath. God is faithful. Another help it gives is that it helps Israel to know their enemies, to know what names and people to look out for, because Edom would be a continual thorn in their side from this time forward. And so we need to take heed and be able, as we say, to name names so that we might be warned. Having put the explanation beforehand, I'll read and make shorter comments, if any, afterward. Now these are the generations of Esau, who is Edom. Esau took his wives of the daughters of Canaan, Adah, the daughter of Elon the Hittite, and Aholibamah, the daughter of Anah, the daughter of Zibeon the Hivite, and Bashemath, Ishmael's daughter, sister of Nebajoth. And Adah bare to Esau Eliphaz, and Bashemath bore Ruel, and Aholibamah bare Jeush, and Jalem, and Korah. These are the sons of Esau, which were born unto him in the land of Canaan. And Esau took his wives, and his sons, and his daughters, and all the persons of his house, and his cattle, and all his beasts, and all his substance, which he had got in the land of Canaan, and went into the country from the face of his brother Jacob. For their riches were more than that they might dwell together, and the land wherein they were strangers could not bear them because of their cattle. Thus dwelt Esau in Mount Seir. Esau is Edom. And these are the generations of Esau, the father of the Edomites, in Mount Seir. These are the names of Esau's sons: Eliphaz, the son of Ada, the wife of Esau; Ruel, the son of Bashemath, the wife of Esau. And the sons of Eliphaz were Teman, Omar, Zepho, and Gatam, and Kenaz. And Timnah was concubine to Eliphaz, Esau's son. And she bare to Eliphaz Amalek. These were the sons of Ada, Esau's wife. And these are the sons of Ruel, Nahath, and Zerah, Shammah, and Mizah. These were the sons of Bashemath, Esau's wife. And these were the sons of Aholibamah, the daughter of Anah, the daughter of Zibeon, Esau's wife. And she bare to Esau Jeush, and Jaalam, and Korah. These were the dukes of the sons of Esau. The sons of Eliphaz, the firstborn son of Esau: Duke Teman, Duke Omar, Duke Zepho, Duke Kenaz, Duke Korah, Duke Gatam, and Duke Amalek. These are the dukes that came of Eliphaz in the land of Edom. These were the sons of Ada. These are the sons of Ruel, Esau's sons: Duke Nahath, Duke Zerah, Duke Shammah, Duke Mizah. These are the dukes that came of Ruel in the land of Edom. These are the sons of Bashemath, Esau's wife. And these are the sons of Aholibamah, Esau's wife: Duke Jeush, Duke Jaalam, Duke Korah. These were the dukes that came of Aholibamah, the daughter of Anah, Esau's wife. These are the sons of Esau, who is Edom, and these are their dukes. These are the sons of Seir the Horite, who inhabited the land: Lotan, and Shobal, and Zibeon, and Anah, and Dishon, and Ezer, and Dishan. These are the dukes of the Horites, the children of Seir in the land of Edom. And the children of Lotan were Hori and Heman. And Lotan's sister was Timnah. And the children of Shobal were these: Alvan, and Manahath, and Ebal, and Shepho, and Onam. And these are the children of Zibeon, both Ajah and Anah. This was that Anah that found the mules in the wilderness as he fled the asses of Zibeon his father. As he fed, rather, the asses of Zibeon his father. And the children of Anah were these: Dishon, and Aholibamah, the daughter of Anah. And these are the children of Dishon: Himdan, and Eshban, and Ithran, and Kiran. The children of Ezer are these: Bilhan, and Zaavan, and Achan. The children of Dishan are these: Uz, and Aaron. These are the dukes that come of the Horites: Duke Lotan, Duke Shobal, Duke Zibeon, Duke Anah, Duke Dishon, Duke Ezer, Duke Dishan. These are the dukes that came of Hori, among the dukes in the land of Seir. And these are the kings that reigned in the land of Edom, before there reigned any king over the children of Israel. And Bela, the son of Beor, reigned in Edom, and the name of his city was Dinhabah. And Bela died, and Joab, the son of Zerah of Bozrah, reigned in his stead. And Jobab died, and Husham of the land of Temani, reigned in his stead. And Husham died, and Hadad, the son of Bedad, who smote Midian in the field of Moab, reigned in his stead. And the name of his city was Avith. And Hadad died, and Samlah of Masrekah reigned in his stead. And Samlah died, and Saul of Rehoboth by the river reigned in his stead. And Saul died, and Baal-Hanan the son of Achbor reigned in his stead. And Baal-Hanan the son of Achbor died, and Hadar reigned in his stead. And the name of the city was Peu, and his wife's name was Mehetabel, the daughter of Matred, the daughter of Mezahab. And these are the names of the dukes that came of Esau according to their families, after their places, by their names: Duke Timnah, Duke Alva, Duke Jetheth, Duke Aholibamah, Duke Elah, Duke Pinon, Duke Kenaz, Duke Teman, Duke Mibzar, Duke Magdiel, Duke Iram. These be the dukes of Edom, according to their habitations in the land of their possession. He is Esau, the father of the Edomites. May the Lord bless his word to us. The reading in preparation for the sermon will be Exodus chapter 21. We've read already Ephesians 6, from which our text will come. The theme, as I've mentioned this morning, is slavery. And I would remind you of the many laws whereby God did not at all abolish slavery within Israel, but regulated it, and not regulating it as something like polygamy, which he tolerated politically, though made very clear he was opposed to ethically, morally, being a sin against the very institution of marriage. No, God gave men slaves, as in Abraham's case. And as we'll read, he allowed, even encouraged, the wholesome use of slavery among his people and even the enslavement of fellow Hebrews, though, according to the natural affection they owed their own nation, limited to 6 years. It was not so limited, though, for other nations. They were allowed to keep other nations as slaves in perpetuity and even generationally, with no sin, assuming all the other requirements, as we'll hear today, of faithful holding of slaves were met. I would note that our passage even allows for permanent lifelong slavery of a fellow Hebrew, assuming he is willing and desirous of that permanence. So listen carefully to the law of God. This is mostly civil law, and in it we have a transcript of the moral law as it applies to the particular civil affairs of Israel. When we apply them to our own civil affairs, we have to change some things given different circumstances. But the principles behind them are unchanging. Now, these are the judgments which thou shalt set before them. If thou buy an Hebrew servant, 6 years he shall serve, and in the 7th he shall go out free for nothing. If he came in by himself, he shall go out by himself. If he were married, then his wife shall go out with him. If his master had given him a wife, and she have borne him sons or daughters, the wife and her children shall be her master's, and he shall go out by himself. And if the servant shall plainly say, I love my master, my wife, and my children, I will not go out free, then his master shall bring him unto the judges. He shall also bring him to the door, or unto the door post, and his master shall bore his ear through with an awl, and he shall serve him forever. And if a man sell his daughter to be a maidservant, she shall not go out as the men servants do. If she please not her master, who hath betrothed her to himself, then shall he let her be redeemed. To sell her unto a strange nation he shall have no power, seeing he hath dealt deceitfully with her. And if he have betrothed her unto his son, he shall deal with her after the manner of daughters. If he take him another wife, her food, her raiment, and her duty of marriage shall he not diminish. And if he do not these 3 unto her, then shall she go out free without money. He that smiteth a man so that he die shall be surely put to death. And if a man lie not in wait, but God deliver him into his hand, then I will appoint thee a place whither he shall flee. But if a man come presumptuously upon his neighbor to slay him with guile, thou shalt take him from mine altar that he may die. And he that smiteth his father or his mother shall be surely put to death. And he that stealeth a man and selleth him, or if he be found in his hand, he shall surely be put to death. And he that curseth his father or his mother shall surely be put to death. And if men strive together, and one smite another with a stone, or with his fist, and he die not, but keepeth his bed, if he rise again and walk abroad upon his staff, then shall he that smote him be quit. Only he shall pay for the loss of his time, and shall cause him to be thoroughly healed. And if a man smite his servant or his maid with a rod, and he die under his hand, he shall be surely punished. Notwithstanding, if he continue a day or 2, he shall not be punished, for he is his money. If men strive and hurt a woman with child, so that her fruit depart from her, and yet no mischief follow, he shall be surely punished according as the woman's husband will lay upon him, and he shall pay as the judges determine. And if any mischief follow, then thou shalt give life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burning for burning, wound for wound, stripe for stripe. And if a man smite the eye of his servant or the eye of his maid that it perish, he shall let him go free for his eye's sake. And if he smite out his manservant's tooth or his maidservant's tooth, he shall let him go free for his tooth's sake. If an ox gore a man or a woman that they die, then the ox shall be surely stoned, and his flesh shall not be eaten, but the owner of the ox shall be quit. But if the ox were wont to push with his horn in time past, and it hath been testified to his owner, and he hath not kept him in, but that he hath killed a man or a woman, the ox shall be stoned, and his owner also shall be put to death. If there be laid on him a sum of money, then he shall give for the ransom of his life whatsoever is laid upon him. Whether he have gored a son or have gored a daughter, according to this judgment shall it be done unto him. If the ox shall push a manservant, or a maidservant, he shall give unto their master 30 shekels of silver, and the ox shall be stoned. And if a man shall open a pit, or if a man shall dig a pit, and not cover it, or an ox or an ass fall therein, the owner of the pit shall make it good, and give money unto the owner of them, and the dead beast shall be his. And if one man's ox hurt another's that he die, then they shall sell the live ox and divide the money of it, and the dead ox also they shall divide. Or if it be known that the ox hath used to push in time past, and his owner hath not kept him in, he shall surely pay ox for ox, and the dead shall be his. Before we move on, I would simply note 2 things. One is that it's presumed here that the slave is the man's money. It's his property, and he is dealt with accordingly under the law. By this, God affirming the right to property in slaves. But then also, we would note that it is a great sin to steal a man and sell him. It was a capital crime in Israel. And so not all slave acquisition is affirmed by God. And there can be, at least in the acquiring of slaves, a great sin that does not immediately implicate all who would ever purchase such a slave so acquired. We often have, in ignorance, purchased things that sin was involved in the production or making of it, and at some point the title is cleaned by the changing of hands. But this shows that God is not a respecter of persons, even when it comes to masters and to those who obtain slaves, and we need to be prudent and balanced accordingly. May the Lord give us wisdom in these matters. Let's move on to reading now Ephesians 6, just the verses of our text, 5 to 9. You recall we just considered fathers and children, and now masters and servants, beginning as Paul did with the inferior. Ephesians 6, verse 5. Servants, be obedient to them that are your masters according to the flesh, with fear and trembling, in singleness of your heart as unto Christ, not with eye service as men pleasers, but as the servants of Christ, doing the will of God from the heart, with good will doing service, as to the Lord, and not to men, knowing that whatsoever good any man doeth, the same shall he receive of the Lord, whether he be bond or free. And ye masters, do the same things unto them, forbearing threatening, knowing that your master also is in heaven, neither is there respect of persons with him. We're still under the 5th commandment. And the principle of that commandment, you recall, was honor. We are to honor each man in our various relations. And I've been opening up now scriptural instructions regarding those various relations and the common ones of wives and husbands, then of children and parents. And now, according to Paul's order in Ephesians 5 and 6, comes next servants and masters. Now, this will, as you'd expect, require a brief introductory note. In the most proper sense, there are no servants and masters in America today. The 13th Amendment has since 1865 abolished slavery and involuntary servitude except as punishment for a crime. Together with the 14th and the 15th Amendment, it is a sad consequence of the conquest of egalitarianism in our country, and especially over our beloved Southland. And it paved the way for worse in Reconstruction and the so-called Civil Rights Movement, all which have proven disastrous for our former slaves and also for our own people. Now, we groan under the heavy hand of God, and we could and ought to take upon our lips Lamentations 5, verse 8. Servants have ruled over us. There is none that doth deliver us out of their hand. But as much as we protest it, abolition is now the law of the land. And as none of you appear to have found it prudent to resist the 13th Amendment by holding slaves anyway, we will not apply the text directly to you today, as Paul does, treating slaves just as common members of the household. Even so, we believe that all Scripture is profitable for us, including this Scripture. And as we hope to see, there will still be much useful indirect application. Let's consider then first our text. Ephesians 6, 5 to 9. We have the inferior and the superior address. So consider the address to the inferior, which is longer here, Paul seeing a benefit in addressing slaves carefully. We have the duty first of the outward man and then of the inward man, speaking of the heart and then of the end. So first the outward man in this word, be obedient. This is a servant's job. It's his vocation. It's in the very word servant, which means one who serves, not one who rules. The Greek word has the idea of a bond. That is, you are in chains, if not literally, then figuratively. It is involuntary. There is no choice. We have politely in our history called our slaves servants, but slave is a proper term for what we're speaking of here. It's an involuntary servitude in which the master, we can say most properly, owns not the man, but his labor and all of it. He has a right to the man's labor. This is not a contract, not employment. It is slavery. And that's what's being addressed. And the word for a slave's job is obey. Do what your master says. Notice the contrast with wives. Wives being much more the equal of their husband than a slave to his master. The wives are told to submit themselves, but here the word is stricter. Be obedient. It's not wrong to speak of wives as needing to be obedient. We hear that the same thing from children. Obey your parents in the Lord. But this is the most abject form of subordination, of inferiority, is to be a slave. And thus the strongest term is right to apply to it. Obey. So thus the outward duty. But Paul, according as he always does with all men in all relations, wants to take the duty to the heart. It's not enough to obey outwardly. He wants the inner man. And so he addresses first their heart's motive or direction, and then the end. So consider the heart. He says, with fear and trembling, an obedience that reveres the master and trembles, perhaps at the master's rod, we read in the Old Testament the propriety of corporal punishment of slaves. This is part of the governing authority of master that he shares somewhat in the rule of a civil magistrate over his slaves, and according to wholesome law, is allowed upon due and necessary occasion to beat his slaves in order to exact obedience. They are therefore to fear and tremble before their masters, but then especially before their heavenly master, as we'll see in a moment. But notice, he goes on to say, in singleness of heart, one mind, one focus. There should not be any part of your soul, not to speak of your outward man, which comes from there, of your heart and its desires that should buck against your master, that should refuse to obey. As he goes on to say, not with eye service. That is not mere outward obedience that's visible to the eye. He says that's what men pleasers do. Every Christian should find this a shameful term. That we would serve merely for other men. That we would only work when boss is watching. And yet, when there seems to be no consequence to our negligence, we would spend away our master's time on our own work. This is a form of theft because the master, being a master, owns all your labor. And thus for you to spend it on something else that he's not asked you to, it is an insult to him. You're not to merely serve with the eyes. As we can read in Titus as well, they're not to steal literally from their master, not just time and focus, but things, not to be pilferers. So there's a heart that desires to serve not only with the eyes, but verse 7, with good will. Notice all these ways that come together to mean really the same thing. Not just an obedient frame and body, but an obedient heart. Gladly, willingly submitting to the master with fear and trembling. Doing, as he says, the will of God from the heart. But this heart is inseparable from the end that it aims at. And this indeed, the end, we can say, is what makes the heart right. Because the Christian slave is to do all these things, not to an earthly master. Notice how Paul calls them masters according to the flesh, setting up the instruction that they are serving not the master that you see, but the master that you can't see, the invisible master in heaven, as unto Christ, he says in verse 5. Or verse 6, as the servants, the slaves of Christ, even as we read in Psalm 123, doing the will not of master, but of God from the heart, and doing service as to the Lord and not to men. Now, this implies the qualification that Paul gave to children, and we obey in the Lord. And one thing that means is you can't obey your master when he tells you something that's outside his authority or that contradicts the authority of God. This should be assumed in all Christian obedience. But that's not the focus here. Paul's emphasizing the focus on the Lord, not to excuse the slave from doing this or that, but to further bind him to obedience, not just with the body, but the heart. He's in all these things to be looking through his master to his heavenly master who set that earthly master over him, and obey the Lord by obeying the Lord, the master, according to the flesh. And then in verse 8, he gives as a motive for this looking unto Christ in his service the final judgment. Whatsoever good thing any man doeth, the same shall he receive of the Lord. Notice, Paul knows how to encourage, and he says you're going to be rewarded. This no doubt would be a comfort for Christian slaves who had masters that were not kind, that were not easy to serve. You're going to be rewarded, if not by your earthly master, have no doubt, by your heavenly master. This is encouraging. But also, there's a wonderful, dare we say it, equality that this speaks of in verse 8. He says, whatsoever good any man doeth, the same shall he receive of the Lord, whether he be bond or free. Paul is not asserting here a temporal equality between master and slave. He is not asserting, certainly not, an equality of all men or of men and women in natural things. That is a grievous error that we'll come to later. He is asserting, however, an authority before the bar, an equality before the bar of Christ's judgment. That there is, as we'll read regarding masters, no respect of persons with God. No one will get a pass at Christ's bar because he happened to be a master. It's the same for slaves. This cuts both ways. God will not show favoritism to the poor or to the rich simply because they're poor or rich. Being poor or rich will give them certain duties that they'll have to account for on that last day. Make no mistake. But the fact of being poor and rich will never excuse anyone from duty. Never excuse anyone. Your master will account to Christ just as you will. And again, this is an encouragement to slaves who had ungodly, unkind masters. And the servants hearing what we're about to hear about the masters would no doubt be a similar encouragement to them. So servants are told outwardly to obey, inwardly to do it from the heart, looking unto Christ, expecting a reward on the last day with God, who will reward both masters and slaves. Now we turn to the superior part. And ye masters. Paul directly addressing masters in the congregation. Note first what he does not tell them. Set free your slaves, because it's impossible to be a Christian and a slave holder. No. And just pause and think about that for a moment. Does Paul countenance sin anywhere in the church in any of his letters? No. Does he take great care to see sin purged from the church in every way? Oh, yes. And does Christ the same? Absolutely. Did Paul and Christ anywhere in all their teaching tell any master to set free his slaves? No. Those who insist that being a Christian and a slaveholder are incompatible are cutting against the authority and are implying that Paul and Christ, God forbid we even say it, countenance grievous sin in the church, tolerating it, not even mentioning it in the opportunities where it would have been expected to do so, where he addresses plainly and to the heart the slave so carefully, and as we'll see, even addresses the master carefully. If it were a sin for him to be a master, it would be an enormous omission here. And we could not clear Paul. But this is God's word. To not affirm it would be to insult God as well as Paul. So ye masters, he says, do the same things unto them. So we have here, like in the husband, the main duty implied and left unstated. Well, he's a master. We already heard from the slave that the slave's to obey, and thus the master is to exact obedience and not be afraid to cause some fear and trembling in his own slave. That's assumed. But Paul, again, as with husbands, knowing the human heart and knowing that in our natural pride, we tend to get puffed up when we have a superior position, he moderates the holding of slaves and the being of a Christian master and gives instructions, not that, but how he is to rule. Ye masters first do the same things to them. He emphasizes what he ended with the slave, the relative equality of slave and master, not in natural things, but before God at the bar of judgment. You both owe each other honor. Same things does not mean you have the exact same duties in detail, but you have the same general duty. You must honor each other. This is the fifth commandment. This is the principle that we've been seeing in every relation. And the same things, knowing that you'll receive the same reward according to the same standard. Yes, each judged according to his particular calling. But nonetheless, the bar of justice will not be lowered for you or for him. He says, your master is in heaven, and neither is there respect of persons with him. Don't think that you will be let off because you are a master. Men might do that. God will not. Do not puff yourself up and think because you have authority that your authority excels that of God. Who gave you that authority? He's your master who is in heaven. You, compared to him, are but a slave, and a much lowlier one than that, than your own slave is to you. So take heed. So he gives them this exhortation to remember a proper sense of equality, but then he applies it for bearing threatening. Paul no doubt has dealt with many Christian masters and many unchristian masters, and he knows that a constant temptation in a master's life is to be impatient, unkind, and harsh with his slaves. And they show that often by excessive threatening. He again is not taking away the proper duty in its place of giving slaves punishments. But he's saying, watch it, moderate it, temper it with Christian love, forbearing, threatening, implying, remembering your master who is tender, gracious, and kind, who in the words of Psalm 103, does not always chide. Didn't we hear this with husbands and with parents? It's a consistent message here in Paul's whole family table here. The superior party needs to take care not to abuse his superiority by impatience, harshness, or unkindness. And so the master must take heed. That's our text. And let's move on now to three doctrines, each with their own brief applications. The first doctrine is this, that it is lawful before God for men to hold slaves and to be slaves. I've emphasized this already. I could spend much more time proving it, but I would simply remind you of what we read from Exodus 21, that God affirms slavery even in a moderate form within the nation of Israel itself, and that even had an option for permanence if the slave was so willing. And this is not to speak of the perpetual slavery of many of the nations around them given by God as slaves to the people. The question of the lawfulness of slavery itself is, to my mind, exhaustively answered by Robert Louis Dabney in a book called The Defense of Virginia. I recommend it highly if you want to consider this question. But I will, given all that we've already said, assume this is proven and move on to application for you. And there are two things under this doctrine I want to press into your heart. One is for your information, so that you would have your eyes open to how things really are in this world and in the church. You need to see, in regard to this matter of slavery, a greater matter that includes many other matters, the great evil of egalitarianism, which is a philosophy that considers all men equal in every way, not this limited equality before the bar of God's justice, or even a limited equality before the bar of man's justice. As we say, justice is blind, and that's right and good. There is a sinful partiality. But that does not mean that all men are equal in every way, but that's the error of egalitarianism, which would level every distinction among men, and would, if it could, level the greatest distinction of all between God and men, by attacking the structure of superiority and inferiority, whether in position or in gifts and nature. Men show themselves to be haters of God because he put that structure in place. And in every way, it is an image of the great structure of all things in which God and the Creator are superior and inferior. Remember the text we've already considered, Lamentations 5:8. The people of Israel complaining, in a phrase that could summarize American history: servants have ruled over us. This evil is complained of a number of places in Scripture. I'll read you just a few. Proverbs 19, verse 10. Delight is not seemly for a fool, much less for a servant to have rule over princes. Proverbs 30, verses 22 and 23. For a servant when he reigneth, these are things under which the earth is disquieted. And then it goes on in verse 23 to say, and an handmaid that is heir to her mistress. Ecclesiastes 10 is another place, verses 5 to 7. There is an evil which I have seen under the sun, as an error which proceedeth from the ruler. I find that fascinating. It's an error promulgated from on high, as it is today in what we call the civil rights regime. Folly is set in great dignity, and the rich sit in a low place. I have seen servants upon horses, and princes walking as servants upon the earth. All things are leveled and turned upside down, and those who oppose this revolution are said to be the ones turning the world upside down, even as they mocked the apostles in their day, simply because they want to set the world right side up again. I want to summarize what I'm saying in a rule that you need to keep, that you should take heed of. I've never seen it broken. A man who hates slavery as such, who opposes not just the abuses of slavery, but the institution of slavery, who asserts not that slavery is inexpedient and imprudent today, but that it's absolutely unlawful in any day, is a man that proves himself willing to twist the scriptures, and therefore he is not to be trusted. Observe and keep that rule, my friends. There's a corollary, to be more specific, that those who despise the old American South for this reason, even and especially including Southerners themselves, who want to, we could say, reconstruct Southern identity by purging it from association with slavery and its inevitable counterpart of segregation, are not to be trusted. They are subversives. They are egalitarians, even if they hide it, despite all their loud protests to the contrary. Indeed, though these men are usually not by profession atheists, they are so in principle, because in opposing outright the authority of a master, they are in principle opposing the authority of God, who himself set up this institution, who defended it, and who will defend it as his own. There's a revolutionary creed which has been used at different times in history. No God, no master. What I'm saying is that those who affirm only the second half, no master, are secretly aiding and abetting those who have no fear to proclaim both parts. Take heed. And second, I give you an exhortation here. You need to not only know these things, you need to fight egalitarianism by being willing to undermine its particular victories, even those won long ago, like abolition, or we could add women's suffrage, or no-fault divorce, and we could go on and on. There's a phrase that comes here, often regarding tyranny, and egalitarianism is one of the worst forms of tyranny today, principiis obsta, which is Latin for resist the beginnings. Stand fast even against the things that seem little, because a little bit of egalitarianism opens the door to much more. So that's our first doctrine. Regarding slavery, and then more generally, it is lawful before God for men to hold slaves and to be slaves, and therefore this condemns egalitarianism. The second doctrine, more directly from this text, is that those laboring for others must be submissive and diligent. I assume here that it's lawful, indirectly, to apply the condition of slavery and its duties to a similar condition of being an employee, as we say. It's not the same. You're under a contract. You have legal rights to come and go from your employment, and I would not take those from you, and nor should your employer. But there is something similar in that though not all your labor is owned by your employer, some, by your willing contract, is. And you must then give that labor diligently and willingly. First, outwardly, by obeying your employer. That word is not too strong if it's rightly understood. If you understand that insofar as he has a right to your labor, you have a duty to give it. And you must do that duty carefully. If you are doing eye service or man-pleasing, only working while the boss is watching, you are stealing. You are pilfering from your employer because you contracted with him by your own will to give him all that time, and you're not giving it. It's theft. It's also lying. So give yourself. This, of course, does not exclude a reasonable arrangement, recognizing our weakness, that there's time off, that there are lunch breaks, etc. And I encourage you to exercise prudence and discretion in these matters. But with your discretion, be diligent. Be known as a man that works even when his master is not watching, his boss, his employer, and do it from your heart. Because when you go to work, you may be working for a boss, but you're working for your heavenly master. And he's the one that's going to give you a reward at the last day, not your earthly master. You get a paycheck from him, and that's good, and that's from the Lord as well. And you can take it as a Christian as a sign of God's approval of you. But you cannot live for the paycheck. You have to live for God and for his approval. And this should underline for you why it is a grievous sin to not serve God at your employer's command. Why, for example, it is a grievous sin for you to work on the Sabbath day because your employer has invented some sense of necessity that is not true necessity. There is true necessity and works of mercy also, but employers do not care about the fourth commandment today, and they will gladly abuse your principles of works of necessity and mercy to invent things to make you break the Sabbath day for their bottom line. You must say no because you work for God, not men. So that's regarding those laboring for others. This will come again in Titus when we get there in chapter 2. But I conclude with the third doctrine, that those who oversee others' work must be gracious and encouraging. I would apply this to employers, to any here who have others working for them. There's some extent in which people are working with you, in which these principles need to be applied as well. And you can apply them further, though, with all the necessary things changed, to those who serve you in the service economy, to those who bag your groceries, to those who deliver your groceries, to those whom you've contracted with, if only temporarily, to do work for you. You, yes, must preserve your own authority. Insofar as, even to a small extent, you are a lord, you need to act like one. It is not humble to give up authority that God has put on you. If God has put a mantle, so to speak, upon your shoulders, you can't take it and throw it off. That's actually disobedient to God. This applies to husbands, it applies to parents, it applies to employers. When you have authority, even if it's only authority in nature and gifts, superiority over others, you've been given that to use for their good, and you can't ignore it. Flee false humility. But as Paul does, so I emphasize even more. Though our egalitarian age needs what I just said, I emphasize even more the manner in which you are to exercise that authority. You need to forbear threatening. I speak to fathers. I speak to husbands. I speak to ministers. I speak here especially to employers. Stop being impatient. Stop being unkind. Do you not remember that you have been given authority for that person's good? That it's not an exercise for your own pleasure or delight? That you have to work at being faithful in your leadership as much as they have to work in being faithful in their service? And do you not know, as Paul says, that you both have a master in heaven, and that just as he will, so will you give an account on the last day? And what if God pulls up your account? God, we could say, it's the great HR evaluation. And he's seeing how you dealt not only with your superiors, but with your inferiors. And he will have written down all the times you lost your temper, all the times you were harsh or unkind, all the times you let fly a harsh and angry word, perhaps even a foul word, all the times in which you were not encouraging, in which you didn't pray for those under you, in which you put burdens upon them that they simply could not bear, in which, God forbid it, you asked them to sin, even by breaking the Sabbath day. You'll give an account for all of that. So I encourage you by repentance and by seeking the grace of Christ to turn from that and to imitate your Lord, who does not always chide, who is kind, gracious, and encouraging to you. Can you say otherwise? O Christian? No. O servant of Christ? No. If you've truly known him, you know his loving kindness. So you ought then to go and do likewise. Let's stand and pray.